Hi friends, it's John Rustin with your NC Family Friday update. This weekly video is a new feature of NC Family where we will discuss significant happenings of the week, both in the North Carolina General Assembly and elsewhere. I'm joined today by NC Family Counsel Jerry Royal. Hey Jerry.
Hi.
And the newest member of our team, Sharon Sullivan, who actually joined our staff on Monday, is our new Government Relations Associate. Welcome, Sharon.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Well, we're 3 weeks into the 2023 legislative session, and typically the first few weeks of the session, and sometimes even the first few months of the session, get off to a pretty slow start. But man, lawmakers have really hit the ground running this year. Last week, if you're on our mailing list and received information from the Family Policy Council, which of course we would encourage you to do, you would have learned that lawmakers in the state Senate took up and passed a Parents' Bill of Rights, which is designed to clarify the fundamental rights that parents have to the care, custody, and control of their children, but more specifically in the realms of education and health care. We testified in favor of this legislation in a couple of different committees as it moved through the state Senate, and look forward to doing that as this bill comes up in the coming weeks in the State House of Representatives. We have a lot of information about the Parents' Bill of Rights on our website at ncfamily.org and encourage you to go there to learn more about this bill and also to take action on it. But this week, the big news was another bill being considered by the state Senate, and unfortunately, this bill would actually legalize marijuana across North Carolina. The so-called North Carolina Compassionate Care Act was discussed in the Senate Judiciary Committee on Wednesday, and Jerry Royal on our staff testified before that committee. So Jerry, tell us about this bill and what took place this week.
Well, a similar bill was passed by the Senate last year. And so they, as John said, they have made it a priority this year, bringing it up early in the session, had discussion on it this past week. We'll be voting on it this coming Tuesday. We have followed this issue for many years, and the evidence and all the information remains the same. The American Medical Association, Food and Drug Administration, American Academy of Neurology, American Psychiatric Association, all say continue research, but they do not support medicinal use of marijuana. There's a long list of harms that continue to be shown through the research without evidence of good outcomes. And instead of the list, there's a good synopsis by the AMA in their language. Numerous evidence-based studies demonstrate that significant deleterious effects abound. Without question, the public health risks are immense. And again, there's a long list I could go through of harms that continue to be shown from these studies. And that's why we're encouraging the state senators, and we encourage you to urge them to oppose this proposed legislation.
Yeah, and Jerry, often, as we have seen, the legalization of marijuana for medical purposes ultimately results in the legalization of marijuana for recreational purposes.
Correct.
Or any purpose. Recreational is kind of a nice word for it's legal for anybody for any reason. And so in states like Colorado and other states that have gone that far to legalize marijuana, even for medical purposes, because there are so many lax controls, but for recreational marijuana, it's just creating havoc in those states.
Exactly. But even from the medical perspective, and this is where they've presented this as something that's very tight, very controlled, but the states that have gone down that first step have found harmful negative outcomes. But as John said, it often leads to recreational marijuana being legal. Yeah. So we see even beginning on this path, there's no evidence supporting it. And so that's, again, why we please encourage you to urge your senators to oppose this.
Yes.
And an easy way to do that is to go to the NC Family website at ncfamily.org. Again, that's ncfamily.org. And we have on our action page, our action center, an easy way for you to reach out to your lawmakers and send them emails about this issue to express your concerns to them. It's got information in there. You can change it and personalize it, but you can easily send an email to your state senators and encourage them to oppose this legislation. Sharon, did you have anything to say about the bill?
Mostly just that it really does need to be studied before we proceed with giving any of our community something that has not been tested to see if there's going to be any negative side effects.
Yeah.
I think it's clear from other states where it has passed that that is an issue. But really, even at the federal level, there's been no studies at all, and we really need to proceed with that before they begin to give this to anybody.
Well, and I think one of the things that I would point out on this is we're not talking about a pill or a medicine that has been approved by the FDA.
Right.
We're talking about people smoking dope to try to alleviate the symptoms of underlying issues. That is not true medicine. And so and Jerry has done a great job really working to educate our lawmakers about that, the medical side and the truth side of this issue.
And one other final note, one of the things we're continuing to hear, and it's called Compassionate Care Act. We all want to be compassionate, but our compassion needs to be based on facts and truth. And one of the hardest things we're hearing is post-traumatic stress syndrome from our veterans and military members. The evidence does not support it. It shows worse outcomes with marijuana. We need to look at the facts if we're really going to be compassionate, and that's what we're encouraging people to do.
Yeah, Jerry.
Right.
And thanks for representing us and our constituents across the state so well in the legislature on this difficult and challenging issue. We appreciate that. So Sharon, you are a registered nurse.
Correct.
And you bring a wealth of practical experience and medical knowledge to the NC Family team, which we're incredibly grateful for. So we heard this week about a lawsuit actually challenging the FDA and the Biden administration in their efforts to legalize widespread distribution of abortifacient drugs, or drugs that would cause abortions across the United States. Tell us about that.
Right. Well, first, I want to educate everybody just briefly on the medications themselves. There are two that are used in the process of a chemical abortion. The first one is mifepristone, also known as RU-486. A lot of people recognize that language from many, many years ago. And the second drug is misoprostol. Together, they work in a combination form to initially deprive the uterus of progesterone, and basically cut off nutrition to the baby through the uterus, which will ultimately cause the baby to die. And then the second drug is administered, which causes contractions and ultimately the delivery of the fetus. So this week, attorneys general from 23 GOP-led states have filed amicus briefs in support of a suit that was brought by our friends at the Alliance for Defending Freedom. The lawsuit argues on behalf of 4 national medical organizations and 4 doctors that the FDA exceeded its authority when it approved these drugs back in 2000. The suit, if it's successful, would hopefully pull the drugs off the market and they wouldn't be used at all. But there's also a possibility that the judge could choose to return to having stricter restrictions on the administration of the drugs, which is what was in place back in 2016. They've since been loosened, and that has led to some states deciding that they're going to go back to expanding the restrictions. So there's kind of a play right here between states' rights and federal regulations and how that's going to work out ultimately in the end for women and protecting our women and our young girls.
Well, and this is such an incredibly important issue because the almost a majority, from what I'm understanding statistically, a majority or close to a majority of abortions that are taking place in our country now are chemical abortions.
Correct.
Through the use of these drugs. And so basically these are at-home abortions where women take these drugs. North Carolina law requires that first drug, and I'm not going to try to pronounce it, but that first drug that starves the baby of progesterone, that has to be administered by a physician in the presence of the woman. And so it can't be done over the internet. It has to be done in person. Correct.
And also, prior to that, they have to have a 72-hour waiting period, and they have to have state-mandated counseling. So when they have moved now to doing the drugs by mail and telemedicine, we're leaving out some very important steps that are in place to protect the women and to inform them on what is actually going to happen and to give them time to really think it through. Skipping the steps is really going to bring some more damage to these ladies.
And it's so important to understand that these drugs lead women to have abortions at home. in
Correct.
their bathrooms. And it's an awful, tragic, and just really, for some women, a really damaging experience.
Yes.
And so that's what we're trying to look out for, not only the lives of these unborn babies, of course, but also the women who were victimized by the lack of knowledge about what this procedure,
Right.
these chemicals do.
Yeah, and I want to point out that one of the doctors that is involved in the lawsuit has said that she, as an OBGYN, commonly sees young women and ladies coming into her clinic after going through this experience at home where they're having excessive bleeding, hemorrhaging, needing to come into the ED to get blood transfusions, experiencing pain that they didn't know they were going to be having. And as you said, often they are home alone doing this. And we just really would like to see that stop, of course, save all babies' lives and protect these women, not just physically, but their emotional state as well.
Yeah. Well, Sharon, thank you for that. And let me just mention that we will be putting out a story with more details about this next week. So if you are on our email list, keep your eyes open for that email. If you're not, go to ncfamily.org and sign up to get our emails. They're very informative. They'll keep you up to date with what's happening, again, not only in the state legislature, but also on issues like this that have significant ramifications across our country. I would also include just a reference to Alliance Defending Freedom, or ADF. That is the legal entity that has filed this lawsuit, and you can get information on their website at adflegal.org. Again, that's adflegal.org, and they've got just a wealth of information if you want to learn more about that.
Yeah, and just a quick comment is the first two issues we've discussed in more depth. You can see part of our purpose is to find the facts and the truth and to share that with people. And it's a bit puzzling because on the first one we're seeing where all the medical evidence points. This one's an example of a case where there's conflict and where they pointed out in this lawsuit that the FDA apparently has ignored medical and scientific evidence, especially when it relates to chemical abortions as compared with others, and made their decisions. And that's why we want to bring you all, as best we can, the facts and the truth to try to encourage decision makers as they're looking at these important issues.
Okay, before we conclude, we've got a couple more little tidbits we want to share with you just real quickly. This week, we also learned that the state revenue forecast for the upcoming fiscal year is far better and far more rich than anticipated, to the tune of like $3.25 billion with a B. Our annual budget last year was about $28 billion. So this is a huge revenue windfall for the state. According to Legislative Fiscal Research and the Office of State Budget and Management, they say the excess revenue is a result of more individual and corporate income taxes collected than expected, strong consumer spending, inflation, and higher interest rates. So you may be thinking that legislators are going, wow, we've got $3 billion and more additional to spend. But an article by our friends at the Carolina Journal quoted Senate President Pro Tem Phil Berger, who's the leader of the Senate, and he was quick to respond to this, saying, and I quote, "While this year's surplus is welcome news, we need to be cautious as we prepare the budget. We must continue to prioritize responsible spending, addressing our state's workforce needs, and providing additional tax reform to our citizens." So, yes, the state legislature has been, I think, in many respects, very responsible with respect to budgeting and taxation, and continue to work to reduce the individual and corporate income taxes in North Carolina and things of that nature. So we will see what this means as the budget process gets underway. I have to point out, guys, as an aside, we are fully anticipating that the legislature is going to once again take up a bill that would legalize sports gambling in North Carolina. They did that last session, and the bill was defeated on the House floor by just one vote. So that we expect, we don't know exactly when, but we expect the lawmakers are going to take this bill up again. Some of the primary justifications for the need to legalize sports gambling in North Carolina is to provide additional revenues to the state, tax revenues, new tax revenues. These budget forecasts and this surplus that we're seeing just shows that that is an invalid argument. And of course, there are lots of other harms. We'll not get into that today, but lots of other harms that the legalization and expansion of predatory gambling in North Carolina would bring. So let's just keep an eye on that. On the political front, we saw a very interesting event in the State House on Wednesday as the chamber voted to adopt permanent rules that will govern the procedural operations of that chamber throughout this session. What's interesting is that actually 5 Democrats joined, they broke party ranks and joined with the Republican majority or Republican caucus in the House in supporting the adoption of these permanent rules. Now that, it sounds like what we kind of refer to as inside baseball, kind of political stuff in the legislature, but this is significant because, as you may recall, Republicans fell 1 seat short of obtaining a veto-proof supermajority after the last election. And so one of the issues that was in contention in the adoption of these permanent rules was a change from last year's rules that would allow less notice before measures come before the House chamber for a vote, like veto overrides. So the vote of these 5 Democrats for the rules may actually signal a willingness by these Democrats to cross party lines and join with the Republican caucus to vote on issues like veto overrides. The Democratic Governor Roy Cooper has vetoed a record number of bills the last couple of sessions, and the legislature, because they have not had, especially in the House, veto-proof supermajorities, have been unable to override the vetoes. So this may be a signal and kind of a precursor to what we will see in the session with a Republican caucus that's 1 seat short of a supermajority working across party lines to bring over a Democrat or some Democrats to potentially vote to override the veto of Governor Roy Cooper. And that will come to play potentially in a number of the issues that we care deeply about, like life, religious liberty, parental rights, school choice, things of that nature. So,
Right.
Jerry, Sharon, any responses to that?
Well, a related note on that, and I think part of this is a big overall picture that I have seen, is the tone of the debate when even there is disagreement. And most people don't realize, and myself, I remind myself, over maybe 90% of the issues they discuss, both Democrats and Republicans agree on. The tendency is for all of us to focus where there's disagreement, where there is a veto. But even in this debate on those rules, some of the members who voted against the adoption of the rules said they really appreciated the fact that the majority party listened to them, interacted with them, reached out to them. And I think that's creating an atmosphere where there is more likelihood of people working together, even with differences, and where people maybe will cross over. Because as we all find in life, when people, and I guess we like to look at it in terms of speaking the truth in love, where we're interacting in a gracious way, it can lead to much better outcomes. And this may be something we're hoping for with some of these important issues.
Right.
Well, and I would just say the proof is in the pudding, so we will see how things bear out as we move through the session. But yeah, the collegiality is something that we don't always see, and certainly the media doesn't report on. They would rather report on the controversial things and the fights and bickering and stuff like that. But you're right, Jerry. So finally, the last item that we've got is a quick story from what I am calling the "You've Got to Be Kidding Me" file. So my colleague, the Norman Woods, who's the director of the Family Policy Council in the state of South Dakota, has come under fire, heaven forbid, for making a statement in testimony before the South Dakota legislature that the safest place for children are in intact families with a married mom and dad. This is unreal. Apparently, Democrat State Representative Aaron Healy vehemently disagreed with Norman's comments and responded, calling his statement, and I quote, "dangerous and un-American." So it's dangerous and un-American
You've got
to believe.
To be kidding
No,
me.
I'm not. That's why I've called it the "You've Got to Be Kidding Me" file. Unreal. It's dangerous and un-American now to recognize that children born or raised in an intact married two-parent family with the mom and dad is the safest and best environment for them. Unreal. But friends, this is the world that we live in now. It's crazy. It's the political arena that we have been called as the Family Policy Council to operate in. So I wanted to raise this to ask and really appeal to you to pray for us. Pray for Norman Woods in South Dakota. Pray for the Family Policy Councils and our allied organizations across the nation who are standing for biblical truth and advocating for biblical values in our political and public policy arenas. And please keep the North Carolina Family Policy Council in your prayers as we are standing for these values on sanctity of human life, religious liberty, parental rights, school choice, responsible government, and protection of faith in North Carolina. Please pray for us, support what we're doing. If you're not on our website, go to ncfamily.org. Again, that's ncfamily.org, and sign up to get our emails. And we would just greatly value that and appreciate it. We can't be successful and effective in doing what we do without the support and involvement of people all across North Carolina. So it's essential that you all get involved. So, guys, before we conclude, anything else?
No, and just reinforcing, you're asking for prayer. The longer we do this work, the more we see. The most important thing is God working in people's hearts and minds. So please join us in doing that and praying, obviously for us, but us and yourselves praying for others, that God would open up people's hearts and minds to, most importantly, be in a relationship with Him, but also when it comes to these important decisions, that we're willing to see what is God's best for people's lives.
Well, thank you, Jerry. Sharon, thank you. Great to have you on the
Thank
team.
you.
Look
So
forward
glad
to
to
working
be
with
here.
you.
Thank you.
Folks, please pray for us. We appreciate it. That's all we have for this week. But please tune in next Friday to NC Family's Friday Update. We appreciate your support. We appreciate your prayers. God bless you and your family. Thanks.